Hi, and thank you for joining us on this webinar. My name is Scott Uttenreither, and I manage the sales team at MMI. And joining me today is our guest panelist, David Boim. David is a consultant who's been working with technology companies for 35 years and is known throughout the channel as a change agent.
Thank you very much, Scott. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm really excited about this webinar because at the end of the day, people are going to leave with some action steps that will impact their company, and that is really exciting and of value.
Great. So first, let's take a look at what we're going to cover over the next 30 minutes. We'll take a look at some key findings from MMI's recent survey of leading technology providers and what challenges that they face when managing contracts and renewals. We're also going to look at some reasons a provider will want to invest in a service renewal automation solution and why not investing in a service renewal platform will negatively impact your bottom line. And finally, David and I are going to help you identify 5 steps that you can use to increase your revenue capture. But before we jump into the survey, let's take a peek at those 5 steps. So these are the 5 steps that will help you maximize your recurring revenues. A customer-facing portal, and why it is important that you provide your customers with access to their information so they can make decisions early into the sales cycle.
And Scott, this is going to be really important because one of the themes through this will be around digital transformation and adopting digital transformation. And basically, a customer-facing portal are the table stakes for you to participate in this revolution.
Excellent. And data is king. So absolutely true. And what can you do to ensure your data is accurate and, more importantly, intelligent?
And Scott, as we go into this, we'll talk about the importance of data and the impact that it has on not only how you manage your support contracts, but how you identify new sales opportunities to drive new revenues for your company.
We'll also talk about automation and the importance of automating sales tasks and capturing key data points and how you can ensure you have the visibility into your key customer metrics and buying trends. And finally, integrated systems. We'll address why this is the end game and why unifying your systems will benefit your organization. It's important to note that we amassed these 5 steps from our survey.
So Scott, if I may, as I look at these steps, it seems to me what you're really saying is that these companies that are on this call and companies that I work with every day need to be able to clean up their data so they can effectively transform their data into meaningful information. That one of the benefits is they'll be able to have a 360-degree view of their business, and by the way, share that information up and down the line. And these companies will reduce customer attrition, identify new sales opportunities, all while simplifying and streamlining a very complex business to reduce costs. So Scott, tell us a little bit about the survey. What are the details?
Absolutely. So MMI surveyed leading technology providers, which included manufacturers, distributors, and resellers. And from this survey, we were able to glean some insight into some of the challenges that our industry faces. Now, keep in mind, David, that this survey was an in-depth and a detailed survey of relatively large providers, with, in fact, 85% of them having global channels. So to get started, of those that we surveyed, 52% do not believe they are meeting industry renewal rate standards, which is certainly eye-opening. I talk to so many organizations who struggle to actively manage renewals, so this is certainly not terribly shocking.
No, Scott, and I work with resellers and distributors all the time, and I'll give you some very specific examples as we get further into this presentation. But one of the things I want to point out is, what is that true standard? Because for some companies, they think, okay, I have a 95% or 90% renewal rate, so I must be doing really well. Some people below that, not quite sure where they stand. I'm going to challenge everybody on this call because I think it's much more than that. It's not just what is my renewal rate, but how have I used my support and contract business to go out and grow my revenue and acquire new customers.
And I think most of us on the webinar would agree. Here's an interesting response, David. 43% of those surveyed are using manual processes to manage customer data and contract data. Now, this leads me to believe that many organizations are in fact limited by their own current systems, so whether that's homegrown or an out-of-the-box or even a best-of-breed product. Most systems are not built for handling service and contract data. Now, this manual intervention may include, for example, loading data into your CRM, manually creating reports, or even manually skimming Excel spreadsheets to identify opportunities.
And Scott, I almost have to laugh because you cannot believe the number of companies that I go into and they are actually managing not just this part of their business, but almost every facet of their business through spreadsheets. And I'm talking about some pretty large companies. And they have disparate systems, so they're actually downloading data into different spreadsheets and manually comparing them. But I want to finish with this thought. If this was 1997, I might get this. But it's 2017. And as we get in here, we're going to talk about what are the impacts to my company by having a manual intervention on such an important revenue stream for these companies.
And a remarkable response that we received is that 69% of these global technology providers are not, and let me repeat that, not leveraging their existing data to upsell or cross-sell services to their customer base. Now, as everyone on this call knows, it is far easier and less costly to generate business from the install base than a new logo. David, based on your experience, why do you think this may be the case for a majority of companies?
Well, Scott, the simple answer is people are adverse to change. And I find that ironic in the technology field, and we'll hit on this a little bit again later as well. But if you don't have your data and you don't have a way of transforming that data into meaningful information, what it means is you're walking by, in most cases, millions of dollars of new business opportunity that you can identify by extracting this data and analyzing it.
And let me share something even more confounding. We learned that only 26% of MMI respondents are currently tracking service attached data at the time of sale. Now, we all know that capturing registration and service attached data at the time of sale is fundamental to creating global views of an organization's service and support business. Certainly without this data, services cannot be easily or effectively delivered throughout the duration of a contract. So having complete customer records is critical, not only to capturing maximum sales and opportunities, but also to understanding your client's needs.
This also points out a dichotomy between the 43% of respondents rely on manual intervention and only 26% currently track service attached data. There's a disconnect there, which tells me that it's much closer to 75% of people are using manual intervention rather than 43%. And think of the headache that this really causes people every single day. When a system goes down, whether it's a server or storage or networking or software, whatever it might be, when it goes down, if you don't have service attached data there, you don't have that information. Is what is the type of service? What is the response rate for that? Am I really covered here? What does that mean? They're going to be calling their reseller, and the reseller is going to be calling the distributor. In some cases, the distributor is calling the OEM, trying to figure out whether a piece of equipment is covered or not. Think about the cost and the manual side of this, and by the way, and the propensity of mistakes. Oh, by the way, and some really ticked off customers.
Yeah, and check this out. This actually corresponds with what you were just saying. Here's something that we were really excited to report. We learned that 59% of respondents are proactively sending out notifications, which is great, certainly a best practice. But of those, 63% are sending those notifications manually. This would certainly infer that resources are having to spend tremendous amounts of time manually reminding customers, perhaps through an email or a call, that they need to renew. These efforts are certainly time consuming. David, what are some of the limitations that you see in the channel with using this tactic?
Well, first of all, it almost sounds like a rhetorical question because it's really obvious. The first is there's going to be a lot more mistakes, but it's more than that because these assets, you have people in procurement that need to get information. You have people that are the management that need that information. Your assets may be spread out nationally or internationally, or maybe in different facilities in the same city. So all those people need to be notified. So the chances of people missing out are great. But let's talk about what it really means. What it really means is you are opening the door to your competitors and to third-party support people to come in and take your business.
We also learned that 72% of respondents are using Teams. Again, this is not shocking considering we talk to large global technology providers. But what does this really mean? This means that these companies are spending vast costs and certainly valuable resources to retain their customers. Certainly how much time and money does that take? We also learned that a majority of these technology companies are challenged with gaining a 360-degree view of their data. And this, again, this should not be a surprise. As we've seen in the results, many are not automating tasks, they're not leveraging their customer data efficiently, and they don't have a grasp on their attach rates. David, imagine what intelligent data is getting missed. Imagine the opportunities that are being left on the table. And this leads me to the final result, which I think sums up what we've learned.
Scott, I just want to chime in just for a second here. Maybe it shows my age when I'm mimicking Gomer Pyle and I go, surprise, surprise, surprise. If companies are using manual intervention, they don't track service attach rates, and the litany of other things that we found, the only thing that surprises me here is that actually 15% are saying they have a single view, and I want to challenge that. I don't believe it's that high. And what does that tell you? And I want to bring up the idea of this concept for everybody here today, and that is either you have a competitive advantage or you have a competitive disadvantage. And what we're really saying here is that there are a few companies that have adopted these types of technology. They have a competitive advantage. The real opportunity for everybody here is, even if you're in the 85% or 90%, if I'm right, you have a wonderful opportunity to flip it and be on the competitive advantage side. And that is what should excite people on this webinar.
And this will lead me to the final result, which again, I think piggybacks on what you just said, is as we expected, a majority of these organizations that participated in the survey are using more than 2 systems to manage contract and service data.
So Scott, to what systems are you referring? What kind of systems are you talking about?
David, this could be a number
outside of spreadsheets, of course.
Yeah, outside of spreadsheets. This could be a number of systems. This could be your CRM. This could be your ERP system. Perhaps you have a CPQ application or configure price quote, billing systems, and certainly more. And keep in mind, many of these systems, which are oftentimes they're homegrown or they're popular platforms that exist in the market, are tracking different bits of those contracts, whether it is your CRM for the customer data, or the ERP for the financial data, or CPQ for quotes. Imagine if there was a single application that handled all facets of the contract process.
And Scott, this is where it's really important. You have to use the right tool and the right job. If you're building a house and you have to cut a 2x4, you use a saw. You don't use a hammer and a nail. I mean, they both can end up splitting the wood, but I don't think that's the result that you want. And so what we're seeing here is we're seeing people bastardize systems like their CRM system, trying to manage their support system rather than having an automated support system that manages their business for them and then funnels the pertinent information into their CRM or into their financial system. And I think we're going to talk about that in a minute or two. So let's move on.
Perfect. And those were certainly some interesting statistics that we learned. So let's talk about, let's look at some reasons a company will look to invest in a service automation solution. And one reason is certainly acquisition. Let's take a look at Lenovo, for example, which recently invested in a service automation platform. Here's why Lenovo made that decision. Some of you may know that Lenovo had acquired IBM's x86 server business, which certainly brought in additional revenues, and we're talking millions of dollars of revenue. Lenovo systems and processes were originally set up for the PC and the server business, and not service renewals or contracts. Initially, Lenovo used IBM systems and tools, but the process was too costly and certainly not a long-term solution.
So, Scott, understanding, now this is a large global, by the way, it's not millions, it's hundreds of millions of dollars of support contracts. And they needed it, obviously, to manage this business. It had to be on a global scale. It had to account for multi-currency and multi-language and different types of functionality. but it also had to take into account the different compliance laws and regulations country by country. And the funny thing about this, Scott, and by the way, it's not just Lenovo, it's almost every company that I run into. The first thing is, could we build it ourselves? Let's save money. We're going to build it ourselves. And Scott, it brings me to one of my favorite sayings, and that is the only people that can make salespeople look like pessimists are IT people. If you ask them, can you do this? The answer is inevitably, yes, we can. And I see this everywhere. No one stops and asks the question, should I actually build this? And do I really understand the complexity of what I need to build? Am I going to account for what I need to build? And by the way, the answer here is invariably no. So Scott, this is a interesting question about Lenovo because they acquired a business, but what are the circumstances that, other than acquisition, that drive people to need an automated system?
Yeah, that's absolutely a great question. Even if you don't experience, or an organization doesn't experience an acquisition, you will still experience complex issues. It's important to note that an off-the-shelf or an out-of-the-box solution cannot solve complex contract management processes. And here are some of the reasons for that case. Now, I'm positive that all people on this call face some of all these issues, some or all these issues every day. Global business requirements, as you mentioned, dealing with multiple languages and multiple currencies. Almost all companies are offering multiple contracting terms and service levels. Most receive data from whether it be their distributors or their manufacturers that is often incomplete and provided in multiple formats, making it quite difficult to parse or query. As we learned from the survey, most don't have global visibility because they're using multiple systems. Simply having to manually create quotes or renewal reminders, all of which is certainly time consuming and takes away from the ultimate goal. And I think we all would agree, David, driving revenue.
And Scott, people sometimes get lost in functionality, but let's talk about how the rubber meets the road. So this last year, I worked with two resellers, one of them out of the Mid-Atlantic, who was selling or sells about $100 million worth of product solutions a year. And yet, and they manage, by the way, they manage their support contract business with one guy who's like 26 years old, 2 years in the business, working off spreadsheets, and their support contract business is about $10 to $12 million at about 15 points. I have another client in the Southeast who has been an adopter, an early adopter of this digital transformation and automation and support contracts. They sell $50 or $60 million a year of product solutions, and yet they have a $25 million support business at 20 points because of the value their portal brings to their customers. They don't have to really worry about third party or people trying to take away margin or their customers, and they actually use this to go out and acquire new customers and then sell other services and products. So it's a double whammy for this other company who transitioned from being mostly a hardware company to being more of a services company that also sells hardware.
Great. So we looked at why a company would invest in a renewal of a solution, but what happens if a company chooses not to invest in a solution, or as we say, sticks with the status quo? Because we all know that recurring revenue is a critical piece of everyone's business. Take a look at what's on the screen, folks. Some or all is true.
And as you look at this, and you can look at it and says, does this apply to me? Do I have poor, unreliable data, blah, 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 blah. Take a look at this. But what's really important here, and what I try to do with my clients, is I try to get them to embrace change. I was asked about a year and a half ago to speak at the Mountain Winery above Silicon Valley, and I had a bunch of executives there from all over the West Coast. And we talked about embracing change. And by the way, I had no PowerPoint. I had one billboard that had nothing but logos. And it was billion-dollar technology companies, ... And I asked them to fill in the blank, and they looked at it, and the answer was they're no longer in business. and they're no longer in business because they're not embracing change. I find it incredible that we're in a business that changes, technology changes so rapidly, and yet tech business are stuck in quicksand, and they can't get out of their own way to make decisions to automate their processes, Scott. And here's a perfect example.
So with that being said, David, let's take a look at those 5 steps to implement maximum recurring revenues. Again, we gleaned these steps from the survey that we just addressed. David, as you mentioned, a customer-facing portal is the first step to embracing digital transformation. It certainly is key to reducing costs, it helps simplify systems, and it provides the right information to your customers to grow your business. A portal, in many cases, will bring value and add value well above what your competitors are providing.
And Scott, there are some solutions out there that will help you manage your business, but if you don't have a portal that's available, first of all, internally to your people, so it's easy to use, and information, by the way, content is pushed out to them, by the way, from your system into your CRM system. Right? If you don't have this, and you don't give this ability to your customers, if you're a reseller or if you're a distributor to your resellers, you're already missing a major component of the value that you bring to the marketplace.
Yeah. And secondly, data is king. Again, no brainer. But David, certainly given your experience in the channel, what does it mean to you?
Well, first of all, I will tell you, a lot of the companies I work with, the first thing I need to do is go in there and help them get a handle on their own data, because it's really the keys to the kingdom. It's the key to the bank. Data equal money. There's not another way to put this. And so, by the way, getting into a system, and I know you're going to talk about OneView, but getting into an automated system will actually force you to have the discipline to get control of your data. And that by itself brings a tremendous return to your company.
And third, I'm sure everyone on this call can sympathize with the manual processes and how cumbersome and costly it is, and why it's important to leverage automation. How would automating reports or downline notifications benefit an organization or even a sales team? What I hear often from my customers is that automation frees up time to market their services and get back to selling. It also prevents poaching by your competitors because you're touching your customers often and early into a sales cycle. A simple best practice is to proactively send out notifications 90 days before a contract or service expiration. Doing this will certainly increase your likelihood of recapturing the business, driving customer loyalty, and reducing attrition.
And Scott, you just gave a litany of benefits, right? Not features, a litany of benefits of what's in it for you. But I'm going to really break it down. Henry Ford figured out in the early 1900s how to leverage automation. And yet we're in the tech field in 2017, and many companies I work with still can't figure this out. I'm not talking about just little companies. I'm talking about very large companies that have to throw a tremendous amount of manual resources at a problem that could be solved quickly. And I want to make one more point here. It's my experience that when companies invest in automation tools like this, they are going to see internal rates of return of around 300%. They're going to see payback in a year. This is not money down the drain. This is an investment that quickly brings a return on investment for my clients, and I'll put it that way.
And number 4, another no-brainer, David, capturing registration and service attached data. And we talked about this multiple times. Certainly doing this will give an organization a 360-degree view of your service and support business, which is so critical to, again, embracing that digital transformation that you speak of. And the results are clear. You'll be able to produce accurate, detailed reports, enable sales organizations to better achieve the renewal rates, and really simplify the effort and processes around the labor and conditions of generating contracts. David, this is huge. This is a huge time and money saver. And finally, the key to service management is an integrated contract management, quoting, and billing system. David, this is the end game. An integrated platform with all of your key data in one system. This is what efficiency is all about.
And Scott, I couldn't agree with you more, but I don't want to gloss over number 5, because number 5 is where the rubber meets the road. We're talking about an integrated contract management system that can do quoting and billing and flow to your financials and flow to your CRM. This is what, now you said efficiency is about. I'm going to put it another way. This is about how you drive dollars to the bottom line. And the folks on this call, you want to be heroes? Go out and start evangelizing the concept of embracing change and the digital transformation around the support business, because it's recurring revenue and it is the heartbeat of many of my clients.
Great. And as we close out this webinar, let me just highlight that MMI's OneView solution, SaaS platform, which simplifies complex contract management processes. And unlike most out-of-the-box or off-the-shelf solutions, OneView will deliver the most value to the customers by streamlining complex processes, leading to greater revenue returns and increased market share. Again, the more complex you are, the more value you would receive from a tailored solution.
Scott, before you move on to questions, I have one question for you. And that question is, if I'm somebody on this call or somebody else that you talk to, is there a way for them to find out what's the right solution for them?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would encourage everyone to take MMI's complexity survey, which will give us and you insight into which direction makes the most sense, whether an out-of-the-box or off-the-shelf solution or a tailored application is the best direction to move in. In most cases, the unique processes and certainly the nuances of a company that a company employees require tailored solution. I'll make sure that we send out the link to everyone following this call.
That's a great idea.
Great, thank you so much, Scott and David. We do have a question from an attendee that says, what are some of the processes behind implementing an integrated contract management solution like the one we've been discussing?
Yeah, I'll take that, David.
Sure.
And that's a great question, and thank you very much. I can't speak to other solutions, but in the case of OneView, we follow a very strict deployment process, which includes certainly detailed discussions, including the creation of a blueprint. And the blueprint is a way for the MMI team and the prospective client to document all of those complex requirements, all those nuances that an organization follows, and the timeline around deploying a tailored OneView solution. You know, once the blueprint is agreed upon, we can begin deploying that particular solution.
You know, Scott, that's really interesting because I use business solutions reviews and blueprinting with some of the other, SaaS clients that I have, and it's a way of getting the customer, getting their technical and functional resources together so they can build out these requirements. Because often what happens is the business wants one thing, the technology people are not on the same page, and they start pointing you in a different direction. I think that's great that you guys have embraced that type of engagement process.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we have one other question. What other challenges do you see, not only in the hardware, software realm, but with subscription? Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. Obviously, as the industry moves away from your hardware and your software and to subscriptions, it becomes very critical or important that you maintain open contact or open relations with your customers. And with subscription, as you know, customer can cancel anytime. So loyalty and creating that loyalty is very important. And through automation, through reporting, you're able to maintain and keep track of your customers in an efficient way. David?
No, Scott, I couldn't agree with you more. As someone who works with SaaS companies, I've just finished working with a SaaS company up in Canada. That is something that is really important as they move on as well.
Perfect. Well, again, great. Thanks again, everyone, for attending the webinar. And certainly, David, thank you. Thank you for sharing your insight and certainly your experience with us. For everyone on this call, we'll make sure that you get an email with the link to the complexity survey. And with any questions, please reach out. Thank you.